Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating, unfolding story, right at the intersection of public policy, education, and, most importantly, holding the government accountable. We're looking at a situation in Telangana that has everyone from educators to civil society and political observers asking some incredibly tough questions. We're going to unpack the sudden resignation of a key education official and what it actually tells us about how hard systemic reform really is. Okay, let's dive into this. Think about it. When governments campaign on overhauling broken systems, do they actually intend to do the heavy lifting of fixing them once they're in power? Or is the language of reform literally just a tool to win votes? Keep that question in the back of your mind as we walk through the evidence today, because it really is the core mystery we're unraveling. To get to the bottom of this, we'll be looking at a high-profile resignation, unpacking the reformists' vision, looking at the political pushback, the hard questions now facing the government, and finally, what this all means for the future of education.
All right, part one, a high-profile resignation. Let's look at the inciting incident that started all of this.
Let's move to and see how this builds up. Our focus today is on Akunuri Murali. He's a retired, elite civil servant, an IAS officer. Now, back during the 2023 assembly elections, Murali was this highly visible public intellectual. He actively campaigned against the incumbent KCR government, doing bus tours, urging voters to embrace change. He really became the voice of anti-incumbency. After the election, the newly empowered Congress government appointed him as chairman of the Telangana Education Commission. Fast forward to 2024, he submits a massive, comprehensive reform report. And then, crickets, absolute silence. Which leads us to late 2024, where Murali just abruptly resigns, stepping down way before his term was supposed to end in September 2026. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that Murali wasn't just some political pundit making noise. The guy is a highly credible, super experienced administrator. He's widely linked to the advisory work behind the Nadu Nadu program in neighboring Andhra Pradesh. And if you don't know, that was a massive, highly successful initiative that completely overhauled public school infrastructure and drew national attention. He knows how to build policy. And that is exactly why his sudden departure from Telangana's administration is so baffling. Why on earth would a government discard a proven expert? Moving on to part two, the reformists' vision. To understand the resignation, we really need to know what was actually inside that 2024 report. So Murali proposed some really deep structural shifts to fix systemic weaknesses. We're talking about merging school education administration with the intermediate board, which handles 11th and 12th grades. He wanted to review teacher pay structures, correct some glaring student-teacher imbalances, consolidate schools with super low enrollment, and reallocate excess teacher positions that were just sitting in urban areas. I mean, these weren't just your routine minor administrative tweaks. These were sweeping, incredibly sensitive decisions that would require massive political will to actually pull off. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why experts felt these massive structural shifts were so necessary. On one hand, you have rural government schools reportedly operating with literally fewer than 10 students, yet they're employing multiple teachers. Total inefficiency, right? But on the flip side, urban institutions are facing massive staffing shortages. And in the middle of all this chaos, public confidence is just tanking as students migrate en masse to corporate junior colleges. The whole system is just fundamentally out of whack. Reforms seemed absolutely necessary to the experts, but as you'll see, they were politically perilous. Part 3. Pushback and political realities. Because, let's face it, when you try to shake up a massive system, the system pushes back. According to critics, the real resistance kicked off over one specific proposal, merging the school and intermediate boards. Observers point out that intermediate education in Telangana isn't just about schooling. It's practically a major commercial ecosystem. Large private junior college networks hold immense economic influence, and they've got deep connections across both political and media circles. So reforming these boards directly threatened to disrupt a highly lucrative status quo. But private colleges weren't the only ones pushing back. Teacher associations strongly opposed the reallocation recommendations, and junior lecturer groups voiced their resistance too. This actually fits into a broader regional pushback against sweeping national policies like the NEP 2020. So, faced with all this intense lobbying from multiple influential groups, what did the government do? Well, nothing. They stayed largely silent for over 3 months after Murali submitted the report. Sure, committees reviewed it, public comments were made, but no actual major steps were announced. To a lot of people, that signaled a quiet retreat from the promised reforms. This brings us to part 4, questioning the government. This is the core of what we're looking at today. The silence and Murali's sudden exit has prompted civil society and journalists to actively question the government's true intentions. The questions being thrown around right now are sharp and totally uncompromising. First up, was the decision to basically ignore the report made in advance? Critics are seriously wondering if the government ever actually intended to implement these tough changes, or if creating the Education Commission was just a symbolic move, a way to look like they're taking action without actually taking on any political risk. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it highlights perhaps the sharpest political criticism of this whole saga. Did the ruling party just use Murali? During their time in the opposition, his credibility as a public intellectual challenging the system was incredibly useful for rallying voters. But once the elections were won, he suddenly became a lot less relevant. Critics argue this sends a deeply troubling message that ideas and intellectual rigor only matter to politicians when it's politically convenient. And, observers are pointing out this might not even be an isolated incident. Recently, the chairman of the state's real estate watchdog, RERA, also resigned. 2 high-profile resignations involving major state institutions in such a short window, that naturally raises some eyebrows. Civil society is really starting to ask, is the space for independent thinking inside modern government shrinking? Are we at a point where only those who perfectly align with government preferences and who promise not to rock the boat are allowed to stick around? Section 5, the unanswered questions. Let's zoom out and look at the macro implications this has for the state's future. So the crucial point is how starkly this entire episode contrasts pre-election strategy with actual governance reality. Before an election, political culture loves to embrace critics, elevate intellectuals, and promise to challenge the broken system. But in the real world of governance, when you're suddenly faced with influential lobbies and tough choices, political calculations almost always take over. The real tragedy here, as observers point out, is that the debate has shifted entirely away from how to actually fix education and purely into a debate about political maneuvering. We absolutely cannot lose sight of why this matters so deeply. While politicians calculate their risks and interest groups lobby to protect their commercial empires, the actual public education system remains in full-blown crisis. Government schools in the state are still facing falling enrollment in rural areas, an ever-growing dependence on private education, and some seriously alarming quality concerns. The kids in these schools are just waiting for action while a massive, comprehensive reform report literally gathers dust. Which leaves us with this final, genuinely profound question to consider. Akunuri Murali was celebrated when he challenged the previous government. But did he just become too inconvenient for the present one? Does politics genuinely seek to reform our most vital institutions, or does it only use the language of reform to win elections? It's a question that civil society is rightfully demanding an answer to, and one that is definitely going to define the future of public education. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the government, keep asking the hard questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.